The following is a video tutorial for Activity 2 basketball drills in VEXCode VR. So for this activity, you'll be using the grid map playground, and there are 3 levels to this challenge. In level 1, you're going to be able to program your VR robot to drive forward, run grid square. Next, program the robot to drive in reverse to get back to the beginning point, and then continue this pattern for 2 grid squares and then 4 grid squares. For level 2, you're going to program the VR robot to drive forward 1 square, stop, and return back 1 grid square to where the VR robot started without using the reverse block. The VR robot will need to turn around to drive back to the first position. You will then continue this pattern for 2 grid squares and then 4 grid squares. And then in level 3, you'll build an algorithm, which will be a process or a set of rules to move through all of the different sequential orders of grid squares. So you're going to go from 1 to 2 to 3, all the way up to 8 grid squares. So down and back, just like you would if you were a basketball athlete doing some basketball drills, running back and forth across the court at greater distances each time. So the VR robot should move to the first square and then go back to the start, move to the second, go back to the start, and all the way on up to 8. For this, I suggest using a variable block, which I do show on the second page down here in the helpful hints section. So with this, you can set up your own variables, and I did that and ended up calling them grid blocks. And then I use the repeat loop so that way I don't have to code out all those movement blocks back and forth. And you can set your grid blocks to whatever value you want, and then change those grid blocks every time you complete one of these cycles. So if I move over to my second tab here, just to show you a quick look, this is how I'd like you to format all of your levels for all of the activities for that matter. You can have level 1, level 2, and level 3 kind of all staggered out next to each other. And please use comments in order to kind of keep things a little bit more organized. So you can see here with my level 1 driving forward and then driving reverse for the different distances. Level 2 driving forward, turning, and then driving forward again to get back to where I started and completing that for the various distances. And then here for my level 3, again, I'm using my variables. So I can say set grid blocks to 1, and then in a repeat loop 8 times, drive forward 4, and then I'm using this operator block here. This is going to multiply this number, which is set to 1 initially, by 200, giving me the distance that I need to travel for each of the grid squares. So drive forward for grid blocks times 200, and then drive reverse for grid blocks times 200. And when I get to the bottom of that, I'm going to change grid blocks by 1. So when I get to the very bottom, this variable now becomes 2 overall, and then it goes back in through the sequence. So it's 2 times 200, so it'll go 400. Gets to the bottom, it becomes 3 times 200, it'll go 600 millimeters, and so on, all the way up to 8. As you can see, I have some other examples that were completed by other students in years prior, and kind of the same idea, just using it in a slightly different way. So hopefully you have some fun doing basketball drills in this activity, and that has been our tutorial for today.